It is night, and a group of 400 slaves are hidden on the outskirts of the city of Enna, ready to launch a surprise attack and capture the settlement. They are being led by a wizard sorcerer named Eunus, who gives the order to attack, while he charges spitting fire and raising incantations and prayers, asking the goddess Atargatis to grant them the longed-for triumph. Join us in this video where we will see the first Servile War. Sicily, 135 BC. The Romans treated their slaves worse than animals. A clear example of this is told by the historian Diodorus Siculus. Quote, "There was a citizen of Enna called Damophilos who was both extremely wealthy and extremely arrogant. He bought large numbers of slaves and treated them in a humiliating way, marking with branding irons the bodies of men who had been of free birth in their own countries and experienced the misfortune of capture in war and enslavement. Because of his willful and savage character, there wasn't a single day on which this same Damophilos didn't torture some of his slaves without just cause. His wife Megalis took equal pleasure in these insolent punishments and treated her maids and those slaves who were under her jurisdiction with great brutality." End quote. An important point to consider is that it was cheaper to buy new slaves than to feed and care for those that a master had in his possession. For this reason, the new Roman elite chose to exploit their slaves by working them to death, and even refused to feed them. This forced large groups of prisoners to engage in robbery in order to survive. The assaults were perpetrated against small rural communities in Sicily, which obviously did not belong to the Roman elite. And when these peasants complained about what had happened to the authorities so that the masters of the thieving slaves would pay compensation, nothing happened. Traveling at night was impossible because of the number and frequency of assaults. It is said that the island went from being one of the most beautiful places in the Republic to an area where insecurity and mistreatment were constantly present. And that is how we meet our protagonist, a slave of Syrian origin named Eunus. This individual was noted for his ability to entertain audiences with magic tricks, such as spitting fire. However, he also claimed to have the gift of foretelling the future, and that the gods spoke to him in dreams. On one of those many occasions, he had said that an event would happen in Sicily where the Roman aristocracy would be displaced, and the slaves would take control of the island, and that he would be crowned king. Amidst the laughter of those who listened to him, some gave him tips, asking him that when he became monarch, he would remember them and have mercy. One day, a group of Damophilos slaves approached Eunus for guidance on what to do, and he told them that the time had come, and it was time to rebel since they had the favor of the gods. He gathered a group of 400 slaves, and they approached the city of Enna during the night and quickly captured it. It is said that they committed unimaginable atrocities, from raping women in front of their husbands to torturing and executing anyone who crossed their path except the blacksmiths, as Eunus ordered them to be chained and put to work immediately in the manufacture of military equipment. As for Damophilos, he and his wife were not in the city, but on the outskirts, and the rebels went in search of him and brought them to Enna, where he was tortured and executed, and his wife thrown from a precipice. However, Damophilos had a daughter who had been kind to her father's slaves to the point of helping many of them. For this reason, the insurgents did not touch her, respecting even her virginity, and allowed her to go safely to Catania, where she had family. Diodorus tells us the following in this regard. The rebellious slaves were furious at all their master's household. Their insolence and desire for revenge were implacable. Yet it was clear that it was not because of any natural savagery, but because of the humiliation that they had previously had to endure, that they went mad and turned on those who had previously wronged them to punish them. Meanwhile, Eunus was crowned king together with his wife and assumed the name Antiochos and called his followers Syrians. Among other orders given by the crowned monarch was that rural villages should not be attacked and that all peasants should be respected, the enemies being the members of the Roman elite who had tortured and massacred hundreds of slaves. This attitude won him popularity not only among the prisoners on the island, but also among the local population, who had great resentment against the Roman elite for exploiting the island without any consideration for the locals. On the other hand, in the south of the island, Another insurrection was rising under the leadership of a slave named Kleon, who successfully, along with other insurgents, managed to take the city of Akragas. Many thought that the two groups would compete for territory and fight each other, but instead they united, and Eunus appointed Kleon as his general in command of his military forces. Shortly thereafter, Lucius Hypsæus was sent from Rome as governor and in charge of 8,000 soldiers. It is not known how or where the combat took place, but it is certain that the rebels managed to gather a force of about 20,000 men, with which they were able to engage in battle and completely annihilate the Roman troops. Many other battles took place during the following months, in which the rebels were always victorious, reaching the point of having about 200,000 followers, of which an estimated 70,000 were fighters. Entire cities fell under the control of the slaves, and their fame spread as far as the capital of the Republic itself, Rome, where some 150 slaves conspired to revolt. The same happened in Attica, where 1,000 prisoners took up arms, as well as in Delos and many other places. But all these rebellions were quickly put down. A year later, in 134 BC, the Senate sent consul Fulvius Flaccus from Rome. However, the details of his campaign and the number of men he had are unknown, probably because his raid ended in a complete disaster. The following year, a new consul was appointed, Lucius Piso, who received the same mission to pacify Sicily. The number of his troops is unknown, but we can estimate that he had about 30,000 men. His first measure was to initiate a siege in the city of Messana. After successfully recapturing the city, he ordered 8,000 of the slaves who had surrendered to be crucified and proceeded to march south toward the city of Tauromenium and begin a siege again. But this time the settlement resisted, and the consul was forced to withdraw without managing to capture the city. The next year, a new consul was sent, Publius Rupilius, who continued the campaign of Lucius Piso, starting a siege of the city of Tauromenium. It is not known how many troops he had, although they were probably somewhat larger than the previous year, perhaps 35,000 men, but this is only speculation. Nor is it known how long the blockade of the city lasted, but what is known is that the inhabitants resorted to cannibalism, eating first the children, then the women, and then each other. Taking this into account, we can assume that the siege lasted about 6 months, long enough for the food reserves to be exhausted. At one point, Komnenos, who was the brother of General Kleon, attempted to escape, but was captured by the Romans. Eventually, the resistance within the city was betrayed by a Syrian slave named Serapion, and all the remaining rebels within the city were captured, tortured, and subsequently thrown off a cliff. With the capture of this important city, Rupilius decided to advance toward the capital, Enna, and began the same procedure again, a total siege to starve the people to death. It is said that the city had ample defenses and that it would not be easy to capture it. The commander Kleon decided to leave the city with a small force and fight rather than endure the siege after realizing that they would soon run out of food. Kleon was captured and the Romans displayed his body full of wounds. And unfortunately, the rebels were betrayed again by one of their own, and the Roman troops managed to get in. Eunus was not in the city. Obviously, the consul was not willing to allow the leader of the insurrection to be spared and ordered an immediate march against them to capture them. Those accompanying Eunus realized that it was all over and decided to commit suicide rather than surrender to the Romans, as they were aware of what awaited them. They literally cut each other's heads off. Eunus was eventually found hiding in a cave along with 4 of his servants. He was dragged violently from his hiding place and taken alive to a prison in Morgantine, where he eventually died of disease. Some say that the Romans did not want to try him and crucify him for fear that in doing so, they would be martyring him. The rest of the resistance on the island was soon broken by Rupilius, who achieved total domination over Sicily in the same year and crucified another 20,000 prisoners as a final punishment. The aftermath of the war is based mainly on estimates, with some sources saying that the Romans lost around 20,000 soldiers in battle and many more thousands of civilians. The dream of a free reign had failed after a short existence. However, this was to be only the first of the Servile Wars, and we invite you to subscribe to our channel to join us as we look at the second insurrection, which also took place in Sicily sometime later. Don't forget to leave a like and a comment to help us continue to grow and move forward triumphantly while traveling in time and delighting ourselves with the marvels of military history. Thank you very much again, and we hope to see you soon.